So just the fact that we're just asking questions along with that, or is this a knock on the defunding of PBS, which is essentially a propaganda network?
Joe Rogan recently spoke out about the way Hollywood has treated Keanu Reeves over the years, and the conversation immediately lit up online spaces. It was not a lighthearted passing remark. It was a deep dive into a pattern of behavior that many in the entertainment world have suspected for a long time, but rarely articulate in public. Rogan's perspective carried weight not only because of his reach, but because of the way he framed the discussion. His take centered on the notion that Reeves, despite his extraordinary popularity with audiences, has consistently been an outsider in the very industry that benefits from his work. It wasn't framed as a conspiracy theory, it was laid out as an observation rooted in the strange contradictions of Hollywood culture. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. Reeves has been in the public eye for decades, his career spanning genres and styles, his box office draw undeniable. Yet Rogan pointed out that the narrative around him within industry circles has often been colder than the one built by fans. To casual observers, Keanu Reeves is one of the most beloved actors of the modern era, a figure whose kindness and humility have become almost mythical. But within Hollywood, Rogan suggested, there's an undercurrent of dismissal, even subtle marginalization, that has followed Reeves from one chapter of his career to the next. The disconnect between public adoration and internal industry treatment is what makes the topic so compelling, and Rogan seemed intent on pulling that tension into the light. Part of the fascination here is that Reeves' career is not the story of someone clawing their way up through relentless self-promotion or manipulative networking. He doesn't embody the archetype of a Hollywood insider, nor does he seem interested in playing the political games that can define an actor's trajectory. Rogan focused on this absence of political maneuvering, implying that Reeves' straightforwardness, his refusal to indulge in the cliquishness of the industry, may have cost him certain opportunities or accolades. The entertainment business thrives on relationships, alliances, and unspoken exchanges, and someone who operates outside that system can be quietly punished for it. Reeves, by this reading, has paid that price without publicly acknowledging it. Another element Rogan emphasized was how Reeves' career choices have often defied the trends that dictate Hollywood's internal respect system. When an actor walks away from potentially lucrative sequels or turns down roles that would solidify their standing in certain elite circles, it sends ripples through those circles. Reeves has made a career out of unexpected decisions, from stepping away from big projects to take indie roles, to slashing his own pay to boost co-stars' salaries. For audiences, these choices reinforce his reputation as a decent human being. For industry power brokers, they can register as disruptions to the carefully balanced economy of ego, prestige, and profit. Rogan's take implied that Hollywood, for all its public posturing about individuality, doesn't always appreciate someone who refuses to follow the unwritten rules. Rogan also dug into how Reeves' humility can be misinterpreted as weakness or lack of seriousness within industry corridors. In a business where self-promotion is practically currency, not loudly asserting one's greatness can lead others to question an actor's value. Reeves rarely gives interviews that are self-congratulatory. He doesn't chase awards season buzz with elaborate campaigns. He shows up, does the work, and lets the results speak for themselves. This approach, while admirable to audiences, doesn't fit the model of constant visibility and status signaling that the Hollywood machine thrives on. Rogan's comments suggested that in a space where power often depends on how loudly one claims it, Reeves' quiet confidence has been read by some as a reason to undervalue him. There's also a deeper cultural layer in what Rogan was pointing toward. Hollywood has a history of treating outsiders with a mix of fascination and skepticism. Reeves' background, his multinational upbringing, his resistance to settling into one fixed identity all contribute to the sense that he operates just beyond the familiar boundaries of Hollywood's inner culture. That outsider quality appeals enormously to fans who see it as authenticity, but within the industry it can mark someone as unpredictable or not fully aligned with the system's priorities. Rogan's analysis made it clear that this distance, both chosen and projected, may be at the root of why Reeves has never been as embraced by Hollywood elites as he has been by the public. The irony, as Rogan hinted, is that Reeves has repeatedly demonstrated that he doesn't need Hollywood's full embrace to succeed. His career has seen highs that most actors dream of, from the Matrix phenomenon to the revitalization of his status through the John Wick series. Each time, the public reception has been overwhelmingly positive, and each time, Hollywood's recognition has seemed muted compared to the scale of the achievement. This contrast raises uncomfortable questions about what the industry values. Questions Rogan seemed determined to make his audience consider. If an actor can repeatedly draw huge audiences and still be treated with reserve by the system, then perhaps the system's metrics for respect and inclusion are less about performance and more about compliance with its unspoken codes. Rogan didn't frame Reeves as a victim. Instead, he cast him as a figure who has navigated the business on his own terms, even if those terms have meant less warmth from the Hollywood establishment. In Rogan's view, Reeves' refusal to bend himself to fit the molds or expectations of that establishment is part of what makes him enduringly popular. Fans see the disconnect between his reception in the industry and his reception in the world, and it becomes another reason to rally around him. In a strange way, the very treatment that might be intended to limit him may have amplified his mythos. But that doesn't erase the fact that, behind the scenes, the lack of acknowledgement from Hollywood power players carries its own sting. One of the more provocative threads Rogan touched on was the idea that Reeves' moral choices may have made some influential people uncomfortable. The industry often rewards those who treat it purely as a game of advancement. Reeves' tendency to share credit, redistribute resources, or focus on projects for reasons other than personal gain disrupts that logic. These actions can unintentionally highlight the self-interest and competitiveness that define much of Hollywood. When someone consistently behaves in ways that undercut that self-interest, they can be viewed as a challenge to the status quo. Rogan's point here was that Reeves, by simply living according to his own ethics, may have created quiet enemies among those who rely on the predictability of the system. Rogan also mentioned the impact of Reeves's public image on this dynamic. His almost folkloric reputation for kindness has been cemented through countless fan encounters, stories, and viral moments. While the general public adores this image, there's an argument to be made that in Hollywood circles, such a reputation can be seen as unserious. The business tends to elevate figures who project control, power, and sometimes intimidation. Reeves' warmth and accessibility run counter to that template, potentially leading some insiders to underestimate his influence or box office power. It's a subtle but persistent form of bias, one that equates kindness with a lack of ambition, even in the face of evidence to the contrary. What made Rogan's remarks resonate was the way he linked Reeves' treatment to broader patterns in the entertainment industry. Hollywood has always been a place where perception can matter more than substance, where relationships often trump results, and where playing by certain unwritten rules can be the difference between being celebrated and being sidelined. Reeves's career, in Rogan's telling, is a case study in what happens when someone opts out of that game. The industry takes the benefits, the box office returns, the cultural cachet, but offers less in the way of prestige or institutional support. It's not an open rejection, but a quiet keeping at a distance that is all the more striking given Reeves' popularity. Rogan's commentary also tapped into a long-standing audience frustration with Hollywood's tendency to favor certain narratives over others. Fans have watched Reeves deliver performances that have become cultural touchstones, yet the industry has rarely lavished him with the kind of awards, attention, or critical canonization it reserves for others. This selective recognition creates a sense that the metrics are not purely about merit. Rogan's framing suggested that Reeves is one of the clearest examples of how the gap between audience love and industry validation can expose the underlying politics of the business. The discussion also had an undercurrent of admiration for Reeves' resilience. Despite the coolness from some quarters of Hollywood, he has maintained a steady career, avoided the pitfalls that derail many actors, and continued to evolve in ways that keep him relevant. Rogan highlighted this not as a story of overcoming adversity in a dramatic sense, but as a quiet persistence that has allowed Reeves to thrive without fully participating in the Hollywood club. This endurance reinforces his image as someone who is in the business for the work itself, not for the trappings of status. Rogan's breakdown of the situation wasn't about scandal or explosive accusations, It was more about lifting the veil on the subtle ways in which the industry can signal who is in and who is other, even when that other is a global star. By centering the conversation on Reeves, Rogan was able to make the topic both personal and relatable. Reeves is an actor people feel they know, someone whose career they've followed for decades. Seeing him as a target of this kind of quiet sidelining made the larger industry dynamics more tangible. The implications of Rogan's perspective are significant. If someone with Reeves' stature can be treated with a certain degree of disregard, it raises questions about how the industry treats those with less fame or financial success. It also forces a reevaluation of what Hollywood actually rewards. The system appears to place a premium not just on talent, but on alignment with its social and political hierarchies. For those who, like Reeves, prefer to remain outside those hierarchies, the trade-off is clear. You can have success, but you might not be welcomed fully into the fold. By sharing this view, Rogan brought into public conversation something that's usually left unsaid. The entertainment industry thrives on mystique, and part of that mystique is the illusion that success is purely merit-based. Pulling back that curtain and pointing to someone like Reeves as evidence of another reality challenges audiences to think differently about what they see. It also gives fans another reason to value Reeves, not just for his work, but for his apparent unwillingness to sacrifice his authenticity for institutional approval. This perspective also invites reflection on how much Hollywood needs figures like Reeves, even if it doesn't always acknowledge them. His roles have repeatedly revitalized genres, sparked cultural trends, and drawn audiences in ways few others can match. Yet his example also shows that the industry's gatekeepers can choose to downplay such contributions if the person delivering them isn't playing the game their way. Rogan's comments made clear that this selective acknowledgement is a feature, not a bug, of how Hollywood operates. For those who admire Reeves, hearing Rogan articulate these dynamics might feel like a confirmation of something long suspected. The idea that the industry doesn't fully embrace him has floated around for years, but rarely with this kind of clarity and focus. Rogan's platform ensured that the conversation reached a wide audience, and his framing made it less about personal grievance and more about systemic behavior. By centering on this one example, Rogan was able to spark a much broader conversation about integrity, power, and the costs of nonconformity in high-profile industries. Reeves, as portrayed in this discussion, becomes both a beneficiary and a casualty of his own principles, celebrated by the public for the same reasons the industry keeps him at arm's length. That duality is what makes his story so compelling, and why Rogan's take resonated far beyond his usual audience. The image that emerges from Rogan's remarks is of an actor who has navigated decades in one of the most image-conscious industries on Earth without losing himself, even if that has meant a quieter kind of exclusion. It's a portrait that is both inspiring and sobering, a reminder that in Hollywood, success is not just about what you achieve, but about how you achieve it, and whether that method fits the mold. Rogan's insight into this reality didn't just highlight Reeves' unique place in the industry, it also exposed the subtle ways in which Hollywood enforces its own culture, often at odds with the values of the people who keep it alive. Rogan's remarks didn't just stir curiosity about the mechanics of Hollywood's inner circles. They invited a closer look at the underlying psychology that fuels this kind of treatment. By focusing on Keanu Reeves, he chose an example that is both instantly recognizable and paradoxical, a man whose career success is unquestionable, yet whose relationship with the industry's highest echelons has always been complicated. This paradox gave Rogan room to explore the mindset of the gatekeepers, those decision-makers who quietly shape the reputations of actors far more than audiences realize. Within that framework, he raised the notion that Reeves's approach to fame itself might be part of the reason for his unusual standing. In Hollywood, fame is often weaponized, leveraged to demand better contracts, greater creative control, or to position oneself in awards conversations. Reeves's fame, by contrast, seems almost incidental to him. He rarely uses it as a bargaining chip, rarely cultivates it through carefully staged media appearances, and often seems more focused on the actual craft than on the image surrounding it. Rogan described this as an act of resistance, whether intentional or not. In an industry where image is a commodity, treating it as something secondary undermines the very currency Hollywood trades in. He also delved into the issue of predictability. Studios, producers, and financiers often prefer actors who fit neatly into a certain mold, because that mold makes them easier to sell to audiences and easier to place in specific marketing strategies. Reeves has never fit comfortably into one category. He can be an action star, a romantic lead, a quiet indie presence, or a genre experimenter, sometimes all within the same few years. To fans, that versatility is a sign of range and artistic curiosity. To industry executives, it can be unsettling. Rogan suggested that this refusal to be pinned down prevents Hollywood from owning Reeves in the way it likes to own its most bankable stars. Without a predictable type, the system struggles to package him in the ways it prefers. Another thread Rogan pulled on was the generational divide in Hollywood. Reeves' career began before the modern age of constant digital branding, where actors are expected to be both performers and lifestyle personalities. Many of today's stars are as active on social media as they are on screen, carefully curating an image designed to keep them in trending conversations. Reeves, by contrast, has remained largely absent from that arena, refusing to turn his personal life into a continuous marketing campaign. Rogan pointed out that for younger industry power brokers, this absence can read as a lack of engagement, even if it's really a principled choice. In a business that now demands 24/7 visibility, opting out can make someone seem like they're not fully playing the game. And in Hollywood, not playing the game often comes with penalties. There's also the question of influence, and here Rogan's commentary was sharp. Influence in Hollywood doesn't just come from box office numbers. It comes from one's ability to create networks, to place allies in key positions, and to align oneself with the right causes or moments. Reeves' influence, as Rogan noted, doesn't operate in those traditional corridors. He doesn't seem to be actively trying to shape the industry's politics, doesn't host elaborate networking events, and doesn't appear to trade favors in the way many stars do. While this independence has kept him free from many of the compromises that come with Hollywood alliances, it has also meant forfeiting the kind of behind-the-scenes sway that would compel the industry to treat him as a central figure. Without that sway, Hollywood can afford to keep him at a polite distance without fear of repercussions. Rogan also explored how Reeves' skill set complicates the narrative. In a business that often rewards specialization, the actor who is always the villain or always the romantic lead, Reeves moves between roles with an ease that defies easy branding. He's been in big-budget sci-fi, intimate dramas, period pieces, and stylized action series, but he resists the urge to cling to any one genre as his signature. This creates a subtle form of resistance to typecasting, but it also frustrates a system that thrives on recognizable patterns. Rogan observed that Hollywood often treats such unpredictability as a liability, even when audiences clearly respond to it. One of the more intriguing aspects Rogan touched on was the idea that Reeves' personal values have, over time, created a kind of informal blacklist in certain spaces. Not a literal blacklist, there's no organized conspiracy, but rather a network of individuals who are less inclined to champion him because his choices indirectly challenge theirs. When Reeves turns down a massive paycheck to ensure a co-star is paid more, it can reflect poorly on those who wouldn't make the same sacrifice. When he opts for smaller productions over more lucrative offers, it questions the idea that the big jobs are inherently the most important. Rogan noted that this kind of quiet moral stance has ripple effects, and in an industry where egos are delicate and reputations are carefully curated, those ripples can turn into undercurrents of resentment. The conversation also delved into the way Reeves' public persona exists almost entirely outside the traditional celebrity pipeline. He's been photographed riding the subway, chatting with strangers, buying gifts for crew members, all moments that weren't manufactured for publicity but became public because others witnessed them. Rogan argued that these organic moments have a power that staged PR events can't match, and that power can be unnerving for an industry built on controlling narratives. If an actor can build a beloved public image without relying on Hollywood's PR machinery, it undermines the machinery's necessity. Reeves' ability to do exactly that may have diminished the leverage those in power typically hold over stars. Rogan also made an important point about the economics of the industry. Hollywood is a place where value is often measured in leverage rather than raw earnings. A star who negotiates aggressively and plays politics can sometimes extract more power than one who simply delivers consistent hits. Reeves' habit of not pushing for maximum personal gain, whether in salary or creative control, disrupts the normal equations that executives are used to. It makes him harder to manage in the traditional sense, because he doesn't seem motivated by the same incentives. Rogan framed this as both a strength and a liability. A strength because it frees Reeves from many of the compromises that entangle other actors, and a liability because it makes him less useful to those who rely on those compromises to run the business. Another layer Rogan addressed was the notion of narrative control. In Hollywood, careers are often shaped not just by the roles an actor takes, but by the stories told about those roles. Press junkets, interviews, and award speeches all feed into an overarching narrative that reinforces an actor's place in the hierarchy. Reeves' reluctance to participate in these narrative-shaping exercises leaves a vacuum that others can fill, sometimes with interpretations that don't serve him. Rogan suggested that this hands-off approach to public narrative is part of why Reeves's cultural significance feels so fan-driven rather than industry-driven. The public writes the Keanu Reeves story. Hollywood merely reacts to it. He also pointed to the way Reeves's physical presence on screen has evolved. In the John Wick films, for example, Reeves not only stars but also performs much of his own stunt work, training extensively to bring authenticity to the role. This kind of dedication is often celebrated when it comes from certain actors, yet Reeves' commitment hasn't been leveraged by the industry as a cornerstone of his prestige in the way it might be for others. Rogan mused that this could be because Reeves' lack of self-promotion means such feats don't get maximized within Hollywood's award and recognition systems. It's a reminder that in this business, doing the work is only half the battle. Making sure the right people hear about it is the other half, and Reeves doesn't seem interested in that second part. The discussion didn't shy away from the cultural contradictions at play. Reeves embodies traits that Hollywood publicly claims to admire: humility, dedication, generosity, yet those same traits seem to have kept him at arm's length from the industry's innermost circles. Rogan's breakdown of this contradiction painted a picture of an ecosystem that says one thing but rewards another, a place where the official narrative about values doesn't always match the actual incentives at work. In this light, Reeves' position becomes both a critique of the system and a testament to his ability to survive outside its full embrace. Rogan's reflections also touched on the idea of time. Longevity in Hollywood often depends on constant reinvention, but it also depends on being part of the cycles of attention the industry cultivates: the award seasons, the festival circuits, the prestige projects. Reeves has had periods of reinvention, but they've often come from unexpected places like a sleeper hit action film rather than a carefully timed prestige drama. This unpredictability has kept him relevant, but it has also kept him outside the cyclical attention economy that Hollywood uses to maintain its stars. Rogan implied that this is part of why Reeves' career feels so fan-driven rather than industry-driven. He surges into relevance on his own terms, not when the industry decides it's his turn. The conversation inevitably brought up comparisons, not as a way to diminish Reeves, but to illustrate the rules of the game. Actors who play along with Hollywood's internal systems often receive waves of institutional support, award nominations, prime interview slots, carefully crafted press narratives, even when their box office results are mixed. Reeves, by contrast, has sometimes delivered massive financial wins without receiving any comparable wave of institutional amplification. This disparity, Rogan argued, lays bare how much of Hollywood's reward system is about conformity to its unwritten rules rather than pure performance. He also explored the notion that Reeves's global appeal plays differently inside Hollywood than it does outside it. Reeves is adored internationally, and his films have drawn audiences across cultures and languages. Yet Hollywood's power structures are still heavily centered on the American market and its prestige systems. Success abroad can sometimes be treated as secondary if it doesn't align with domestic critical acclaim or awards attention. Rogan suggested that this bias may have further contributed to the lukewarm institutional embrace Reeves has received, despite his undeniable worldwide fan base. The topic also allowed Rogan to examine the fragility of the Hollywood hierarchy. If Reeves, with his unconventional career path, can consistently deliver hits and maintain cultural relevance without buying into the system's rules, it exposes how optional those rules might actually be. That's a dangerous idea for an industry that relies on those rules to maintain control over its talent. Rogan implied that keeping Reeves at a distance could be a way of signaling to others that his approach, while admirable, is not the one to emulate if you want full institutional support. From there, Rogan turned to the artistry itself. Reeves' performances, particularly in roles that tap into his natural restraint and understated intensity, have connected with audiences in a way that resists critical trends. Hollywood criticism often favors visible transformation, accents, elaborate physical changes, emotionally demonstrative roles, while Reeves' craft lies in subtler spaces. Rogan noted that this kind of acting is harder to fit into the usual award narratives, which may explain why it's less celebrated within the industry, even as it thrives with audiences. This mismatch between critical fashion and audience preference further complicates Reeves' standing in Hollywood. The conversation underscored the strange duality of Reeves' position. He is both indispensable and peripheral. The industry benefits enormously from his work, yet it does not elevate him in proportion to that benefit. Rogan's ability to articulate this duality without reducing it to simple jealousy or malice gave the discussion its depth. It wasn't about villains or victims. It was about the structure of an industry that has certain built-in biases, and about one actor whose career quietly challenges them simply by existing as it does. By the time Rogan wrapped his thoughts, the image he had drawn was clear. Keanu Reeves is a figure who operates at the edges of Hollywood's power structure, while still being one of its most bankable stars. His distance from the game is both the source of his unique appeal and the reason for his incomplete embrace by the system. In Rogan's telling, this is not a temporary condition or a misunderstanding to be corrected. It's a natural outcome of a career built on choices that privilege personal integrity and artistic curiosity over institutional favor. And in an industry that prides itself on controlling the narrative, someone who writes his own script will always be treated with a mix of admiration and caution. Rogan's deep dive into the Keanu Reeves question didn't just focus on individual personalities or decisions, it also peeled back layers on the structural DNA of Hollywood itself. In his framing, Reeves wasn't merely a famous actor with a complicated professional life. He was an emblem of how the entertainment machine treats those who refuse to be fully absorbed into it. This opened the door to a broader discussion about the nature of institutional acceptance in creative industries and the kinds of compromises that are often expected in exchange for status. One of the most revealing aspects Rogan touched on was the quiet, almost invisible process by which the industry decides who becomes part of its inner mythology. Hollywood doesn't simply make stars, it canonizes certain figures, weaving them into the cultural lore of the business through a continuous cycle of media, award ceremonies, and curated narratives. The individuals who achieve this status aren't necessarily the most talented or successful in objective terms. They are the ones who fit the mold that the system is currently promoting. Reeves' refusal to mold himself, even in subtle ways, means he exists outside of this carefully constructed pantheon. This matters because, as Rogan implied, inclusion in that mythology is about more than ego. It determines whose stories get told in the industry's own archives, whose careers are studied, and whose names are kept alive in retrospectives. By keeping Reeves on the periphery, Hollywood effectively limits his presence in the historical record it curates for itself. Even if his public legacy remains strong, it's a soft power move. Not erasing him, but placing him in a side gallery rather than the main hall. Rogan also explored the human instinct for conformity that runs through any large system, even one that claims to champion originality. Hollywood, with its constant talk of innovation, actually depends on predictability in order to function smoothly. Stars who can be predicted, in behavior, public statements, career moves, are easier to market, manage, and integrate into broader strategies. Reeves, by contrast, is unpredictable in the best possible way for audiences, but the most inconvenient way for executives. The man might follow a massive blockbuster with a meditative indie, or disappear from the spotlight entirely for months. To the people whose livelihoods depend on controlling momentum and anticipation, this unpredictability is a logistical headache. The conversation also touched on the concept of symbolic capital. In many industries, including entertainment, certain people become symbols of the system's own self-image. A Hollywood that sees itself as bold and glamorous will elevate actors who embody those traits in obvious ways. Reeves, while unquestionably charismatic, embodies a different set of qualities: restraint, humility, quiet craftsmanship that don't fit neatly into the high-gloss image the industry likes to project. This mismatch means that, while the public sees him as iconic, the system doesn't see him as the ideal figure to hold up as a symbol of its own identity. Rogan pointed out that this isn't about disliking Reeves on a personal level. Many people in Hollywood likely admire him, but admiration doesn't always translate into institutional support. In a way, Reeves' independence can make him less useful as a symbol for the system's self-congratulation. He doesn't attend every industry gala, doesn't become the centerpiece of award season campaigns, and doesn't publicly align himself with the causes or narratives the industry is currently emphasizing. That absence of alignment might be read as neutrality by outsiders, but in a politicized environment, neutrality can be interpreted as a lack of support. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on Hollywood's treatment of Keanu Reeves? What do you expect? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.